Hi, folks. This week we covered the Battle of Gettysburg, which in the summer of 1863 is probably the point that when people talk about the turning point of the Civil War or the moment in which the South has its greatest opportunity, perhaps to win its independence, to swing a knockout blow against the Army of the Potomac, the primary Northern Army. It's generally considered to be Gettysburg. That's that point in time, and that has generated a huge volume of debate and literary output in which people attempt to assess what goes wrong with the Gettysburg campaign for the South. Why is it that Robert E. Lee, who had won victory after victory, suffers this terrible defeat during the 3 days of the battle in South Central Pennsylvania? And I think part of the debate centers around the status of Robert E. Lee. By the end of the war, he probably symbolizes more than any other single person the cause of the Confederacy and sort of Southern nationhood. And he's probably the number one hero to Southerners by the end of the Civil War. And of course, then there's going to be a great reluctance to put the blame of the loss at Gettysburg upon Robert E. Lee, even though Lee himself, after the battle is over with, takes responsibility. And in fact, after Pickett's charge on the third day, it's Robert E. Lee who again and again says, "This is all my fault," and tells his corps commanders basically to look after their men and not worry about the blame for this catastrophe. Obviously, Robert E. Lee does deserve a significant amount of the responsibility for the Southern defeat. He's the person in command. But there's a range of things that people talk about, factors that lead to Southern defeat. One of them at the very beginning of the battle that Lee himself was concerned about was the absence of most of the Confederate cavalry. The cavalry represents the eyes and the ears of the Army, and General Jeb Stuart, the primary Southern cavalry commander, had taken his men on this long ride around the Union Army. He's replicating the earlier feat that he had accomplished in the war before. And Stuart is basically looking to repair the damage to his reputation after a fight called Brandy Station, in which he was surprised by Union cavalry. And so Lee marches into southern Pennsylvania basically blind. He doesn't have the information from his scouts about what lies ahead. And then the Battle of Gettysburg develops with neither side planning it. The armies, given the road network, which is like sort of the spokes of a wheel radiating out from the city of Gettysburg, it draws the armies to each other, and then the battle breaks out, and neither Generals George Gordon Meade nor Robert E. Lee planned to fight there. So the lack of cavalry support is a major Southern problem from the outset. I would say also that Lee had a habit of commanding rather loosely. He expects his lieutenants to sort of have the discretional ability of carrying out his orders as they see fit. And that had worked earlier for Lee when his primary partner was Stonewall Jackson. Jackson was someone who had flourished under independent command, and you could count on General Jackson to do his job without minute oversight from his boss. But Jackson is dead by this point. He dies at the Battle of Chancellorsville. And so Lee has to reorganize his army. And so the battle is going to open, and Northern forces are pushed back through the town of Gettysburg up onto the heights to the south and to the east. And at the end of that day, Lee tells one of his corps commanders, General Richard Ewell, to take a position called Culp's Hill, which he could see geographically would command the entire battlefield. And Ewell's men are already tired. They've already been fighting all day and taken significant losses. Lee tells Ewell to take the hill if practicable, but he doesn't just tell him do it. And Ewell doesn't take Culp's Hill. He decides to wait till tomorrow. By then, Union troops have occupied the hill, and it's too late. So some criticism lands upon Lee for his sort of hands-off style of leadership at Gettysburg. Lee gives orders, and he expects his commanders then to follow them, but it's kind of a loose style of command. On the second day, lots of criticism has been landed on the shoulders of General James Longstreet. Longstreet has sort of taken the place of Stonewall Jackson. Lee refers to him as my old war horse. Longstreet's very slow in getting his soldiers into position. It's not until late in the afternoon that they make their attack over on the right side of the battlefield. And they have significant success, but the day's over with, and they nearly succeed in breaking the Union line, but the Union position is strong. It's shaped like a fishhook that allows the Union commander Meade to shift soldiers around to meet crises, and the attack ultimately fails on the second day. Lee then orders Pickett's charge, that frontal attack of 12,500 men across a mile and a half of open ground with all the Union cannon pointed at them. Most people recognize that Pickett's charge is a mistake, that never should have been launched. Lee afterwards himself admitted that he thought his men could do anything, that he doesn't take the advice of General Longstreet, that there was never 15,000 men in uniform that could take that position. So there's lots of focus on Confederate mistakes, misjudgments, the handling of the army. But you have to remember that the Union troops at Gettysburg deserve credit for really fighting well. And the Union artillery commander, Henry Hunt, does a masterful job of managing the Union artillery, conserving their ammunition for the right moment. General Meade does a good job in commanding at Gettysburg. And the position, the geography favors the North heavily. One criticism of Lee is that he should have looked at that ground and marched away, maneuver to find a better position where you're not at such odds. And Lee decides that the enemy is there and he's going to strike him there. And so a combination of factors really results in this Union victory. And afterwards, the South is going to play defense pretty much until the end of the war. So I hope you've enjoyed this week. We've covered a lot of interesting topics for 1 week. So have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you folks later.